This is Matt Geller with Best Food Trucks. We're starting our first podcast here to really convey a lot of great information to vendors. I currently work with over 2,500 food trucks on the Best Food Trucks platform that are active and getting shifts and catering through us, but we also have another 3,000 that are just kind of on the platform. So we decided to do this so we could really be able to reach out to food truck operators and give them some great advice. Lucky today, one of my favorite food truck operators in the country, one I've been working with for, I think, 9 years, who doesn't just have a food truck, but has one of the best food truck Facebook groups and the most informative Facebook groups in the country. With us today is John O of the Fix on Wheels. How's it going, John?
Good. Thanks, Matt.
You know, I know this story, but I would love just to hear a little bit about what got you into the food truck space and the first beginning parts of your journey, which moved you from what I know you used to do, which was work on Wall Street, into the food truck world.
Sure. So I started the food truck in 2017. My career before the food truck industry was on Wall Street. I was a bond trader, and I had done pretty well on Wall Street, but it had gotten to the point where I just kind of burned out and just wasn't interested in doing it anymore. I really was looking for something to do. I didn't necessarily have the idea of doing a food truck. A friend of mine owned a brick and mortar, the Fix Burger in Silver Lake. They were in business for over 10 years at that point in time, and literally was the best burger I ever had. And I was thinking about things to do. My friend had mentioned that you should partner with Paul, the owner of the Fix Burger, and said, figure out a way to help him expand. He has a great burger, but he's having, he needs to expand and kind of scale his business. And so I reached out to Paul and I said, hey, I think we should do something together. And Paul's like, great, we can start another brick and mortar location. I'm like, no, let's do a food truck. He said, what do you know about food trucks? I go, I don't know anything about food trucks. Literally nothing. I said, but I do know that you have a great product. I know I can sell anything. And so he's like, what's your culinary experience? I go, zero. I have zero culinary experience. My exact words were, dumber people than me have been successful at it, and I think I can do a good job doing this. I'll learn the culinary experience by working for you for 6 months for free. I'll learn everything I can. And so that's what I did. And I basically was first guy in, last guy out, learned everything I could about how to make his burgers and as much as I could about the culinary side. I started the truck in March, and I knew I had a winning product and just learned a lot of lessons along the way.
When you were thinking about this, because you didn't have any culinary experience, the only reason why you chose burgers is because you already had faith in this burger. Do you think you would have chosen something else if it had been anything else, or do you feel like burgers were the right choice for you, considering your experience?
I wasn't going to have the culinary skill to pull off something that was going to be high cuisine. That just wasn't in the cards. Either I would have to farm that out to hire a chef to do that, or I would have to learn it, which wasn't going to happen in that short amount of time. I've done enough grilling and cooking as an amateur that I figured I could make a burger, right? I also knew that burgers were kind of universal, right? You needed to have, I didn't think the world needed another taco truck. So I said, okay, tacos are kind of out of the question. And I knew that I had a good product to start with. So I knew that burgers were going to be kind of a lot of competition because there are a lot of burger places you can eat, right? But I didn't see as many burger trucks. So I kind of figured that I had a little better entry point at that point. But the big part was just knowing I had a good product, because having a good product in my mind at the time was the most important thing, or one of the most important things. And as it turned out, it's important, but it's not the most important thing, And to answer your question, that's why I started off. I already had a head start knowing that I had a good product.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I love about your Facebook page, which I think you should just touch on a little bit. But you give really no nonsense advice about being a chef versus being a business person, and the importance of having both, for sure. But sometimes just being a chef is not going to do it. What made you decide to start the Facebook group, Food Trucks Unfiltered, and start to kind of convey some of this really, really important knowledge that you ended up gaining?
I was on several other food truck groups on Facebook, and I felt like a lot of the things they were talking about was very fluffy. It wasn't very useful. It was all stuff like, you can do it, and here's things but it was very not nuts and bolts in terms of things that you could learn. You can buy a book. There's a Food Trucks for Dummies book. There's a bunch of people who are trying to teach courses and that sort of stuff. But I felt all that material was basically not very deep and not very useful in a practical sense. So I started the group because I found a lot of the other groups lacking. Actually, a friend of mine in the group actually encouraged me to start the group. He's like, you seem to be critical of these other groups. You should just start your own group. You're better at this than these other guys. And then that kind of dovetails into the whole idea of you're talking about a chef versus a businessman. For most people, who start this seriously, this is how you make your living. For me, it became how I made my living. It wasn't like I was sitting on a pile of Wall Street money and going, I'll just do this as a hobby, right? I mean, I had some money where I could invest this, and I had access to capital from other Wall Street buddies and family and friends that I could tap into. So I had a little bit different cushion than other guys did, but still, it was still money that I didn't want to just burn through. So for me, a big part of it was learning that this is a business. And a lot of the things I found lacking in food trucks and food truckers was talking of business. They talk about the culinary side, they talk about these things, that thing, if you have good food, then people will come. And that just wasn't what I found. I mean, we had arguably one of the best burgers around, but it wasn't like all of a sudden we would set up and we would post on social media and people would talk about it. But all of a sudden, that we would get jobs. That's not how it worked. You had to really understand the numbers. You had to really drill down into the business side of things. You had to understand that where are you getting your money from? Like, you can't just show up to where there's people and expect that that's going to convert to sales. You can think that I'll just park where there's a lot of people and there's be sales, but that doesn't work. You could park at a Home Depot. There's tons of people coming in and out of Home Depot all the time. You could get permission to park on there a lot, but I doubt you're going to get very many sales because people don't go to Home Depot to find food. You could park in front of a grocery store in front of Costco.
They don't go there to find gourmet burgers. They might go there to find like a tamale or.
They might. And again, it's about finding your customer, right? Yeah. And so those are things I wanted to talk about. So when I started the group, I really wanted to drill down into things that people didn't talk about, like numbers and like marketing and really understanding who your customer was and why things didn't convert or what the real conversion rate of sales were. Like when someone tells you there's going to be 100 people or 1,000 people at this event, what should you really expect in terms of sales? And a lot of this was like trial and error, learning things that, from an event from 12 to 5, you're not really going to be selling all those 5 hours. You're going to be selling between 12 and 2. Between 2 and 5, it's going to tail off, and you're going to have to change your menu because between 2 and 5, it's going to be appetizers, snacks, and drinks.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my most favorite directions of your posts is how much money you're making per hour. Like if you tell me that you made $2,000 in a shift, but then I find out that it was a 12-hour shift, then it really wasn't that great of a shift.
Sure.
And so the ability to really break things down by the hour and just how much more money you make with volume. Like a 15% organizer fee makes a whole lot more sense, once you get over 2,000 versus, just 1,500. And those are the things that I know a lot of vendors don't think about. And what was the thing that you wish you would have known before you started in the game? Because you spend so much time filling in all these blanks for all these people that are getting started now. But what was the big thing that you wish you would have known?
There's a lot of things I could think about, but like right off the top of my head, I wish I would have thought about how to best capitalize on that metric, sales per hour. When are you likely to make the most amount of money? Lunchtime, for example, 11 to 2, and dinner time between, call it 5 and 8:30. That's when you're going to make the most amount of money. And when you find that you're asked to do something between 12 and 8 or 12 and 5, I'm not likely to make a lot of money during these hours here, right? And making the best use of my time. If you can make more money per hour, your actual costs, everything as a percentage of your sales as a cost goes down. I'll give you an example. I pay workers basically minimum wage plus tips, subject to a floor of $30 an hour. No other food truck does this. I actually say that. So no matter what on my food truck, my worker is going to make at least $30 an hour, including tips. And if the tips are insufficient, then I'll kick in to where they're at $30 an hour. If it's in excess of $30 an hour, including tips, well, they get to keep all that money, right? So they know that they're going to make at least $30 an hour, which is great for them, and that gives me incentive as a owner to make sure that I pick places where they're going to tip well, so I don't have to come out of my own pocket. But if you're paying $30 an hour, okay, for one worker, and I go to a lunch spot and we do, let's just say for argument's sake, you're doing $100 an hour. It's a lousy lunch spot. That $100 for the hour means that 30% of my money went to pay for labor. My food costs are at least 20%, call it, right? So you're at 50% right there. So half my money went just to food and labor, not to mention the overhead of the gasoline, the propane, the cost of the truck, if you're renting it, the commissary cost, the insurance cost. You can start seeing at $100 an hour, you're making a whole lot of money. And if you're paying the organizer another 10% on top of that, remember that goes to that. Not to mention there's also a 3%, effectively almost a 4% fee for your POS, your processing. If you're like doing Square, they're charging now 10 cents a transaction plus 2.6 per.
2.6 plus 15 cents
now. Right, 15 cents, you're right. Now 15 cents, right? So, unless you're doing $70 tickets, you're getting clobbered on that, right? I mean, your effective rate ends up being like almost 4% or in excess of 4%. So you start adding that up, it's like death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing $1,000 an hour, right? And I have even 2 workers on the truck, okay, that's $60 an hour. And for $1,000, it's like, okay, well, that's not very much money. My food costs are still only 20%, right? And everything just starts, you can start making your money much more quickly that way. That comes down to how much money you can make per hour. So you really want to maximize that. That's something I never really thought about until you start breaking down the numbers and going like, I spent all day doing this and I have this much to show for it, but that's not the same profit margins as when I did something that was a catering where, hey, I made $2,000 in 3 hours and we're done.
And no food waste. You didn't run out of food. You knew exactly how long.
Exactly.
There's a pretty big learning curve. I think you were probably out for about a year before people really started to request you.
Probably a year and a half. Yeah.
And so, what did your first 6 months look like financially? Like,
it was horrendous. So I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, you have to understand that the first 6 months, especially in a market like Los Angeles. Los Angeles is a very interesting market because we're the most mature of all the food truck markets, right? We have over 4,000 plus trucks in Los Angeles County alone, according to what I just saw in Google.
4,000 permitted mobile vendors.
Yeah, permitted ones.
Yes, about 3,000 actual food trucks.
Right, and then you have a bunch of guys who are operating illegally. But let's just say we'll just talk about the guys who are operating legally, right? So no one has any market share here. Nobody has the ability to control the market or move the market at all. There's no Warren Buffett's, right? I can't say something and make anything happen, right? So you have to establish your brand. And a lot of it just for the first 12 months ended up being, you just go out just to be seen, right? So that people know you exist. Something I did the very first day was like, I actually gave away 100 burgers and fries the very first day I opened. When we opened up, I'm like, we're not taking any money today. We're gonna just set up right by USC, because our commissary is right by USC. We'll just drive to USC, we'll park on the side street, and we are going to give away burgers. As students walk by, we're going to engage them, say, hey, we're a new truck, we'd love you to try the burgers. And we're going to, for today and tomorrow, but we didn't say it in tomorrow, for today, we're giving away 100 burgers and fries. All we want to do is have you just order as if you're ordering and not pay anything, okay? Order the burgers, modify them however you would do it. Like you don't like mayo, you don't like lettuce, tell us those things. We'll do all those things and we'll make you the burger and the fries and you take a drink. And if you like it, tell us what you think about it, Instagram it, do some stuff, and then and maybe write a review. We did this over 2 days. What it allowed us to do is it allowed us to test out our systems. It allowed us to actually see how the whole flow happens. Someone comes to order, you punch it in the POS, you put in all the modifiers, out comes the ticket. You then get it in the back of the truck or the back of house, you cook it, and then you do everything, and then you expo it, and you try and do everything you can to test like where are the bottlenecks and where are you screwing up and what's taking the longest amount of time. And we got, we gave away 100 burgers and fries pretty quickly that day because poor students, they're happy to do that. And the burgers were great. They're better than anything they ever had. And then we started getting, and people wrote reviews. In the first 2 days, we had 30 reviews on Yelp.
Wow.
So immediately I had something to start with, right? Now you can't tell Yelp that we're giving away free food because then your reviews, right? So you had to kind of like tell people like, hey, you can't tell people you got it for free, but I want you to be honest. If you don't like it, please tell us first before you write like the burger sucks, right? But we did that. We got some Instagram and some social media, and that helped a lot. And then after that, it was just a matter of like taking anything you could do to get your name out. So we found out at first, like, well, I had no idea about bookers. I'm thinking, well, just park on the street and there's people. And you learn very quickly, yes, there's a lot of people walking by. The conversion rate to sales, very low. Even though you're on campus, it's like because you're too pricey for them or they don't have money. And so that's an issue. Or they're walking to class. So why are they going to stop and get a burger here and then go walk to class? So you have to kind of catch them at that time. That's another learning experience, right? That they've got to be willing to buy at that point in time. That's one thing. But a lot of those things, and then finding out that, okay, well, I want to go vend in an office building. Well, how does that happen? There are bookers who handle that. You can walk to the office building, and the office building will tell you, like, well, we deal with an organizer who does this. And then that's when I found out, at the time, you guys were Lot Mom. Yeah. This is how long ago it was, right? And I reached out to you on Lot Mom and say, hey, I saw your site. I'd like to get into some of these, these things. And you're like, okay, great. Fill this information out. And then you start getting booked on those things. And, you're new, we're new, so you want to put us on kind of like the lower, kind of like, oh, we'll give you the lower volume ones first to start. We can't throw you at something that's high volume because you may not be able to handle it. And and then you start working your way up, and then you start seeing other places you can get into. And then you start realizing over time that where the money really is the private catering. But you need to be seen or have some kind of presence online to be hired for private catering.
Do you remember your first catering gig?
My very first catering gig was my friend Josh. His son, Riley, was an actor on the TV show Scorpion. His son talked to the craft services guy. He reached out to me and said, we'd like you to cater something. And we did okay. I mean, we learned very quickly how difficult it is to serve that many people that quickly, right? Because our first catering was a set. You're dealing with PAs who are getting orders for like 10 different people, and they're getting calls going like, no, change that to this. And this one, no, now we need 5 more of these.
Yeah.
And now so we were struggling to keep up. Generally we did good. There was a few kind of things like, hey, the fries were a little undercooked because our fryer couldn't keep up. Things like that you learn. But I remember my first catering was like, wow, there's really good money in this. Because they'll like, well, we'll pay you $2,000 for 100 meals. I remember not even knowing how to price it at that point. Like people are like, well, what would you charge for 100 people? I'm like, I don't know, this, and then you figure out that, that particular group, they weren't as price sensitive. As long as it was reasonable, they'd pay the money, right? And that far beats walk-up sales at an office building or an apartment complex or setting up on the street, So that was the holy grail.
When we first launched the Best Food Trucks catering platform, you applied for it and it was BMW of America.
I remember that, yeah.
You were like, oh, Matt, that's kind of a lot of money per person. I was like, well, it's a big account and that's, what their budget was. And you said, okay, I'm taking the double patties, I'm taking the possible burgers. Like you went and just really blew it out. And that 29 people actually, I think, turned into 42 people or something, 46.
Yeah.
And they were so happy about it. But like, that was when we first went, oh, wow, catering is a big deal because everything we had done was buildings or streets or cities or whatever. And the catering thing we had done a little bit of, but that's when I was like, wow, even for us, if we can get trucks, these catering gigs, they're going to make more money, we'll make more money, and we have a whole lot of clients, so they're going to be pretty happy.
Right. No, it was fantastic. And by that time, we had done enough caterings to learn to kind of streamline our operations and learn how not to get our teeth kicked in. And I remember that catering very well because it was probably more than double what we had typically been getting. And it was a really good catering.
$39 a person.
Yeah. It was a good one.
When I think about the catering and how you just went, okay, I'm doing this. I think your application percentage is something like 90%. And I had another burger truck in LA that's super popular, and they're so frustrated that you were getting everything. I said, they apply for everything. Well, we've been applying, we didn't get anything. And I went through the records and I said, you've applied in 3 months to 7 catering gigs. John's applied to 310. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so he's made X amount of dollars and you've made 0.
Right.
Oh, how do you do that? I was like, he just applies every day. Now we have the auto apply, which, hopefully is good. But the catering thing, I think a lot of new trucks don't realize what an absolute huge part of their business it ends up being.
Sure, yeah.
So, so you get your food, you're gonna get ready to get your food truck open. Was there anything you changed about recipes? Was the burger on the truck the exact burger in the restaurant?
No, it wasn't. We had to do a few different things. So for example, we have a burger called the Fix on Fire, which is our jalapeno burger. The restaurant, what they do is they bread the jalapenos, they deep fry them. There's no way we could do that because at the time, I started off with the very first truck was your typical old school catering truck, roach coach, right? Which has no freezer. They have refrigerators. You learn
cold plate refrigerators.
Yeah, cold plate refrigerators.
Yeah.
So if you actually want to keep the refrigerator running, you actually have to start the engine and turn on the compressor, right? And they'll blow cold air. It's really old school. And so there's no freezer on board. So you couldn't keep breaded things like onion rings or any kind of breaded frozen stuff. It just wouldn't work. The breading would fall off and it just gets in the fryer and it doesn't do it. So we had to grill the jalapenos. So we had to change the menu. No more breaded jalapenos, they're grilled jalapenos. The other thing is that we didn't do half-pound burgers. Like the restaurant does half-pound burgers. I'm like, there's no way we can cook half-pound burgers as quickly. So I started doing 2 quarter-pound patties. But people would start going like, do I need to get a double? Because the double is pretty big. So we just started going to single patties. Little things we changed there, right? Mm-hmm. The restaurant would always use several different types of buns. They use a brioche bun. They would use a sesame seed bun, a plain hamburger bun. And I'm like, we can't do all that. We're just gonna go straight with brioche. That's it. Yeah. They had a few more cheeses than we did. But a big part of it was just learning to scale it for the truck. And then also, because a truck has much more limited space, we had to find a lot of ingredient overlap. Okay, so one thing I learned very quickly is like, we're only using pepper jack cheese for this one burger. I've got to find something else to use this pepper jack cheese for. Otherwise, we're just going to buy pepper jack and it's going to go bad, right? Because you're using more cheddar than anything else. I didn't want to change the recipe and say, well, this burger which gets pepper jack now gets cheddar. It's going to change the taste. But what can we also find that uses pepper jack, right? So we came up with a few other items. The menu kind of grew and said, okay, we can do a spicy chicken sandwich, right? So we did this thing called the angry chicken sandwich, a fried chicken sandwich with the brioche bun, but we'd use pepper jack cheese to add to the spiciness. And we would do this mayo where we did like an habanero mayo.
Yeah.
We called it angry mayo, right? And then there was another one, like we can also do like a spicy turkey melt. So we did an angry turkey melt where we did sourdough and then we grilled the pepper jack cheese and then, pepperoncinis and then, grilled turkey, right? And we did that.
So now you can get through a package of pepper jack.
Exactly, without throwing it away, right? And then we also phased out things that we weren't using, like Swiss cheese. Like no one orders Swiss, so just took it off the menu, right? Things that we would use sporadically. We'd use avocados and eggs sporadically. Just took that off the menu. At first we did garlic fries, but it was just for the extra dollar, it wasn't really making a lot of sense for the amount of slowdown that we had. So we just took that off the menu. Yeah. So you start streamlining and start carving the menu out. And then as you get into things like catering, you don't give them the full menu. You start saying that, listen, I'll give you 3 out of the 7 burgers on our menu. You get to choose whatever 3 you want, but you get 3. You're not going to be all 7.
You got to serve 100 people really, really quickly.
Right.
If you've got 10 things, it's impossible.
Right. And it's the same thing also for event. When you do large-scale events and you're serving 100 covers in an hour, 150 covers in an hour. We just did something recently and we're doing those kinds of numbers. And when you're doing those kinds of numbers, the people are going to buy what you have on the truck anyway. If you don't offer something that you normally would in the full menu because you're trying to streamline the menu and get it out, people are going to be much happier saying, well, I don't get to choose that, I'll choose this instead, but they get it out in 5 minutes as opposed to, we got to stop everything to make this one burger, to accommodate this one guy, and that holds up everything now to 10, 12 minutes, 15 minutes. These are all things you learn on the truck. And I think a lot of chefs and a lot of trucks start off way too ambitious on their menu. Yeah. Way too ambitious.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, we've touched on a lot of different revenue streams for you. I'd love your saying, whenever you talk about your 6 revenue buckets, your 6 revenue streams, can you just kind of walk us through the 6 that you really rely on?
One thing I did, I'm a big data junkie because I was a Wall Street trader, right? So we keep a lot of numbers, and numbers are something I understand very well. For me, I look at data. And so I used to keep an Excel spreadsheet of every single stop. So back 8 years now, I have every stop we've ever been to, every metric. Here's the address, here's the organizer, here's the sales, how many times we were there. There were basically 6 categories of where I was making my money. And I started bucketing into those 6 ways to see how much of my business is due to each of these 6 categories. And the 6 categories are office lunches, residential dinners, schools, and by schools I mean carnivals, open houses, things like that. Any kind of events like concerts, sporting events, catering, and breweries. Yeah. Okay, those are my 6 basic ways where I was making money. And I started bucketing things by going well, how much of my percentage of my business is from catering, and how much is it versus breweries, and how much is it versus this? And then start breaking things out what's my average sales per hour at these things? And man, these things are losers. Why am I doing this, right? And and how do I get more of the ones that are making me good money? How do I get more school events? For burger trucks, school events are great. Obviously, catering is great for everybody. How do I get more catering, right? And then you start getting to things like, your utilization rate, how chargeable is my truck? If I have 7 days to work, but my truck is only running 4 out of those 7 days, well, what am I doing these other 3 days? Can I increase that? And, so you start getting to things like that.
And so you would say the thing that turned out to be most profitable easily is catering?
By far is catering. You have a few events that actually can beat catering, but they're very few and far between. Very, very few and far between. And again, depends on how you structure your catering. My catering has a $2,000 minimum for up to 3 hours of service, right? So I tell guys that buys you approximately 95 meals in my current pricing. Yeah. So if you have 80 people, hey, my minimum is $2,000. You have another 15 meals of leeway, or 15 people can eat twice, but you're gonna have to pay $2,000. And most people are fine with that. I've even had people pay $2,000 for 20 people.
I know.
If they've got the money and they're willing to do that, that's fine.
That BMW event was something I think you made $3,000 for 50.
It was a real good amount of money. And again, catering for me is always going to be built into my numbers. This is what I'm going to make. So I know that my margins are generally at least 45% to 60% for catering. And so it's great. You get in for 3 hours and you're done. So you don't burn out your workers and you're out quickly, and then you can actually take a second catering that day. I've had days when I've done 3 caterings in a row.
That's great. One of the things that you hear me harp on it all the time, it's one of the things that trucks can do to increase bookings is to have that signature block. Every time you send me an email, whether it's from your iPhone or whatever, you always had your name, your truck name, a link to your menu. I think you have your Yelp review on there.
Yeah.
Link. I think there's a story written about you.
Right.
You have everything. And I run into these things where a lot of times some of our big clients want to activate something really quickly, and I'll send something out to 50 trucks in a region, and 60 or 70% of them are like, hey, I'm interested, John Smith at AOL.
Right.
I'm like, okay, now I got to find out who's actually interested. I think about one of our big clients who needed basically 2 months worth of fully paid 4 trucks a day, 2 in the afternoon, 2 at night. It was a very, very big bill. And all the trucks that got back to me right away with all of their information, they're the ones that got booked. To me, that is the one thing, having a signature block with all your information and having a good email. Not like, hey, I'm available, but like, hey, I'd love to do this. This is who I am. I'm awesome, And that's something you've been good at. Can you think of anything else like, hey, you can do this today to be better?
Yeah, I mean, like obviously the signature block is a really big thing because I think you want to go into it making it easy for the client to say, "I'll book you," right? I mean, so the signature block helps a lot. If you can want to put in pictures of your food, that helps tremendously. Okay, that's one thing I learned. One of the things that I had learned the hard way was that because we had done so much catering, we were such a catering-based truck. When I finally did an event next to 5 or 6 other trucks, and my menu wasn't really visual, right? I didn't have to do a visual menu because I'm like, okay, we're getting hired for these guys. It's a captive audience. They're going to order. I can just put a print menu here and some pictures here. I was stuck next to a truck that had beautiful pictures on their menu, but a very inferior burger. I mean, the truck was selling a frozen patty on a sesame seed bun at 40% higher price than my burger. And he didn't put the prices on his burger. But he outsold me at least 2 to 1 that day. And I had the better burger.
But he had the big
He had the big
side.
He had the big thing, right? And it was because his pictures sell. So you have to understand that people look at pictures, right? That's a big thing. I would say that have the signature block, have any kind of thing that will make the client look at it and say, I want to book, So pictures are a really big thing, but make it really easy for them to pick you and then contact you immediately.
Yeah, and the picture thing is like such an important thing. I had one truck say, it's a grilled cheese. Everybody knows what a grilled cheese looks like because I asked him to put some pictures on with his proposal.
Right.
And he didn't get picked.
Right.
And I'm like, oh God. But the other thing is your descriptions on your menu are like fresh tomatoes, crispy lettuce. Like you're really good at that. So having a descriptive language in your menu descriptions has been, I think, really good. I think as an organizer, when I see a truck that did all those things, had the right pictures, right descriptions, the signature block, I'm like, oh man, I want to work with this guy. Because if somebody's really, really thoughtful in the setup, most likely they're going to be really, really thoughtful in the execution. One of the things that has been great, first as us working together, we're friends now. You've always been very vocal about the good organizers and the bad organizers and what makes both. But you've also been really good at describing what makes a good organizer and what makes a bad organizer. And for people first getting into the industry, I think it's really, really important to have that, at least a bit of a baseline, because you didn't have it.
No, I didn't.
You had no idea.
Yeah,
right?
I had no idea. Yeah.
So, what would be your top 3 things, good organizer, and bottom 3 things, I guess, for a bad organizer?
So I think the top 3 things for a good organizer would be one, understands that they have 2 customers. Yeah. Like they have the client and they have the trucks, and they have to keep them both happy. A big part of that is understanding that you don't want to be a typical a temp agency just filling positions. You don't want to simply say that, okay, look, these guys need a truck. We'll just give them any 3 trucks so we're going to get paid, right? Yeah. That's a good organizer will actually curate the trucks and say that, listen, here we are in Woodland Hills. It's this is a more affluent part of the valley, right? This is not Panorama City. This is not Pacoima, which is more working class, right? This is an upscale part of the city. So you would understand that if you're going to send a truck to an office building here, that office building is going to have certain clients that are going to want a certain quality of food, right? So sending them a taco truck will be fine, but sending them a taco truck every single day would be the wrong thing. This might be a clientele that they would appreciate something like Asian fusion or Mediterranean or things that are just outside the norm of what they might normally get. A good organizer would also understand that, hey, these trucks are the best trucks for this. They present well. They turn out their food quickly. A good organizer would also understand the lay of the land, going there's a building here in Woodland Hills, but right within walking distance, they have a lot of burger places around here, right?
So don't send a burger.
So don't send a burger truck. We could, but warn the burger truck. Hey, there's other places around here. We can try it one time, but as a warning, or they could ask the client these things, right? Yeah. That's a good organizer. That's one thing. Another thing is a fair fee, right? Not just charging a upfront fee. A lot of these organizers who are bad always charge an upfront fee. And so it doesn't make any difference whether your incentive is no longer, once you get your money, you don't care whether I do 1 ticket or 1,000 tickets. You're you've already made your money. Yeah. What it should happen is that your interests are aligned with my interests. That's kind of self-explanatory. From my point of view as a truck, is to make sure that the bookers actually know who the trucks are, right? I'll give an example that you can probably relate to. We recently had some fires here, and we had one big organization that came and served a lot of people, was World Central Kitchen. They're a great organization. However, World Central Kitchen, instead of reaching out to someone like Best Food Trucks, which is a local entity that knows all the food trucks in Los Angeles, right? You know everybody here, right? You know who's good and who's worth talking to and who can actually serve these kinds of numbers. They were trying to do everything out of DC, and they didn't have a list of who the good trucks were and everything else. So that organizer, as good as they were on paper, my experience with them was that you don't know who the trucks are here. You don't know who the best guys are for here, right? And in fact, World Central Kitchen, when they hired us, they wanted us to change our menu. They actually said, we want you to have a balanced meal. They said, no French fries, no chips. We want you to give like a side of potato salad and a piece of fruit. And I thought to myself, like, my personal opinion was like, the house just burned down. Let them eat some French fries if they want some French fries. That was my particular opinion, right? But my other opinion was like, I'm not the truck for you, man. I don't know why you're asking me to change my menu to do this. It's not like I don't want to, but it's like, I'm not built to all of a sudden now have to prep 300 sides of potato salad, right? Even if we buy the pre-made potato salad, I still have to scoop it out and portion it, right? Which is something we don't have to do, right? It just goes to illustrate that I'm not the right truck for you. If this is what you are stipulating as you want as the menu, talk to a Mediterranean truck, talk to a healthy truck. Right. Talk to these guys, a sandwich truck. Don't talk to me. I'm not the guy for you. So I think a good organizer understands that. Those are the inverse, obviously, for the bad organizers. There are some bad organizers that all they want to do is just fill the spot. They don't care. Bad organizers also don't know their clients. They don't care about their clients. Bad organizers never ever visit sites. I had one recently where we went to an apartment building, and apartment buildings are kind of tricky because you usually deal with management companies. And management companies give you a number to call. And that number is the same one the residents call. It just goes to a voicemail. And you never get to talk to somebody on site unless you go through a bunch of prompts. Yeah. And even then, you may not get to that person on site. You might get a live person, but that person's in Salt Lake City doing all the leasing for all their properties, right? We recently had something where we showed up to this place and there was construction where the truck was supposed to load in and park. And the construction was not going to end until 5 o'clock when we were supposed to start. I'm like, I can't find some place in this really tight spot to then park off to the side so we can prep and then move the truck over there. And no one showed up to help me and everything else. And I remember talking to the organizer going like, have you ever been to your location? And I found out that she had never actually even visited this. She had just signed a contract with them and never once took a look at the place.
We do a lot of videotaping. We make management companies do like all around videotaping.
And that's fine. I know that, listen, you guys are nationwide, so you can't be at every single spot. But there's ways of doing that and just better instructions. I think the best organizers understand that loading in on a truck is very different than like just putting in an address on a GPS and just driving it in your car because, oh, it's that building over there, we just drive over there. Trying to do a 15,000 pound truck to make a U-turn against traffic is just not going to work, right? You want to make sure that he's like, hey, this is the route you want to be in. And the better organizers have started to realize that, hey, you can drop a pin. Yeah. Instead of just drawing me a map and circling something like on Google Earth, you could actually drop a pin and say, this is exactly where you're going to be. And here's another pin where you load in from. So take this road to here. This is the first pin. And the second pin will take you right to where it is. In fact, that's how I tell my workers where we were at.
One of the things as a booker, we're called bookers and organizers, that we've really started to implement, especially since people haven't come back to office spaces, is the minimum guarantee. And there's a couple things with the minimum guarantee that I find really, really useful. And the first thing is just accountability. When I say to somebody reaching out for a food truck in a big building, and they say, oh, we've got 1,000 people, they're going to do great. And I said, well, can we do a minimum guarantee? Well, I don't know. Well, if you're not sure that they're going to make $750, maybe this isn't the right fit. Oh, no, we're sure. But we can't do a minimum. If you have that minimum at $750, I know you're going to do everything in your power to not just send one email to everybody, but send 10. I want people subscribing to Best Food Trucks so we're sure that we send our automated emails out. Then there's also a lot of times when we just don't get the business because we're not willing to sacrifice a shift for a food truck that goes there and does $200. The mitigation of risk is what we are trying to do for food trucks, and we're always considered middle management. So I want to be there to make sure that the food truck has a great experience, and that minimum guarantee is one of those best ways to do it. So when I'm thinking about the best food truck operator, there's some things that, when you're talking about it, you're saying, oh, you got to have some culinary, you've got to have business. But the things that I find just easiest to work with? Obviously the signature block, but really a food truck operator that gets back to people in a timely fashion. Like there's so many food truck operators that are like, oh, I'll get back to you in 2 days or 3 days. What are the things that, now that you've been a food truck operator forever, you advise food truck operators, what are the things that you think are the best qualities to make them the best that they can be?
Well, obviously, I think getting back to people on a timely basis, understanding that everything is time sensitive. I can tell you that from experience, I've been told by you that I'm the most booked truck nationally for catering. There's no one more booked than me, and that's largely because I just answer everything.
For best food trucks you are.
Yeah, for best food trucks, yeah. So the reason is because I answer everything quickly. I'm usually within the first 5 responders every single time. That's just part of my, my background as a trader, that, something would come across my Bloomberg screen, you answer it and you deal with it right away. Otherwise, that opportunity goes away. And there's an old saying on Wall Street that time kills all trades.
Yeah.
Right? You wait for something long, it's going to die. You're just going to neglect it, and that opportunity will go away. But in terms of being a successful food truck operator, it's obviously one, being receptive and responsive to everything that comes across. Be on your toes for your email, your texts, your phone calls, be able to pick that up. I need to step off the truck so I can spend time doing that as opposed to cooking, right? I'm at that point now where it really makes more sense to do that. But a successful food truck operator, you need to be part culinary guy. You obviously have to know how to execute the ideas. You have to be a great business person. You have to understand that this is a business, and you have to understand the numbers and the operations behind that. You also have to be partly a mechanic. You have to be, I don't know anything about fixing trucks, but I do know I have enough people as a support staff. I have a mechanic who can come out to me. I have a fryer repair guy who can come out to me and deal with my fryer and any kind of gas stuff. I have a person who handles my refrigeration. These are all things that can go wrong. You start learning. You need to be flexible and start learning these things, because you'll find out with trucks is that they're mobile kitchens, and these things were never really meant to roll around on pothole, ridden Los Angeles streets, and things go wrong. And something that's as simple as just understanding how everything works. I'll give you the perfect example. I spent $200 once to get my fryer guy, who's kind of an all-around kind of repair guy, because I was having problems getting power from my generator to something else. Well, after he drove out 2 hours in traffic, it was as simple as the cable from my generator had come loose. All I needed is push it in. That was it. Simple as that. That cost me $200, right? He didn't even want to charge me. I'm like, I got to pay you for your time. He says, okay, well, $200. I'm like, all right, well, I'll learn this lesson, right? Something as simple as that, learning that this switch does this. Like when I first got this new truck, I had no idea. The owner didn't tell me. At the time when I was renting, she didn't tell me that this switch does this switch does this. I remember specifically showing up to Santa Monica to do a job. It was one of your jobs. And I remember the health inspector was coming out. And I remember turning on the faucet and water just dripping out. I'm thinking to myself, did my cleaner forget to put in water in the tanks? This is an instant shutdown. Not just shutdown, but you are shut down and you have to wait at least 10 days. You can expedite it, but you're gonna pay almost $500 to get it re-inspected within 10 days. In the meantime, you are shut down. And it shows up on your record. If the people actually look for you, it says, shut down on this date, no water. So I remember calling the person saying, I didn't open my doors, we have no water. And so she was cool. She's like, cool, I'm not gonna shut you down. I'm not gonna I'm glad you told me this. I'm glad you didn't open your doors and find this out, because we could have shut you down. But it turned out, drive all the way out from Santa Monica over to Paramount, where my commissary is. We put the hose back in. No, the tank is full. It's not that you have no water. So I'm thinking to myself, something went wrong. I drive the truck back out to South El Monte, which is where the builder is, and he comes on the truck and says, hey, see this toggle switch? Turn this on. It's the electric water heater, or electric water pump. And it was literally one switch, and no one told me about this, and the water just comes right out. You really need to know the ins and outs of your truck. What does this switch do? And then understanding wiring on your truck. Like, for example, in my truck, for certain things on the truck, the generator goes to a battery charger, which then goes to the battery, and it takes the tap off the battery. If the battery charger dies, then no power goes to the battery eventually drains, and then you will lose your fans, your cameras, you will lose your lights. I found this out the hard way. If I had understood that you need to have a separate battery charger as a backup, it's a $100 unit, just keep that on hand, that would have saved everything. But you don't learn these things until you're in the weeds, right? Yeah. So that's a big part of it. So learning that, having a good bunch of people on hand, be really, really cognizant of just inspecting your truck all the time. Things always break down at the most inopportune times, and you just have to understand that. Those are the things, a lot of trucks don't really kind of keep on top of.
Right.
You know. Hey, so one other thing also people don't think about when they're opening a truck is the cost, the whole commissary, or what are they going to do with the truck when it's off-site, right?
Well, what is a commissary
Right.
first?
So we take it for granted here in Los Angeles, but in Los Angeles County, a commissary is required. And a commissary is basically a place where you not only park your truck, but you service your truck. And it gives you electricity, so power, it gives you water, it gives you a place to dump your wastewater, your grease, and basically a place to clean and service your truck. Commissaries are generally places where you can get propane, so you don't have to go find a propane source. People don't think about that. It's like, where are you gonna get the source to power your appliances? And also a place where you can get ice, and you can get cleaning services, and that's really important. I see other parts of the country where it's not a requirement, and I understand that people would rather not do that, you know, if they don't have to pay the money. In Los Angeles County, a commissary is running about $1,400 a month. But you think about it, that's where you park your truck. There's security. And the great thing about it is I think there's accountability. If I've worked 12 to 18 hours in a day, the last thing I'm gonna do very well is clean my truck. And I have a burger truck, okay, so we generate a lot of grease. If you pull off the vents, the fans are covered with grease. There's just grease on the bottom of the vents, and that has to be cleaned every night. So at a commissary, we have a cleaning crew, and I pay the guy to do that, and the truck is immaculate every single day. If you're parked with 100 trucks in this commissary, and you're not adequately cleaning your truck, people are going to complain, and it's going to be very noticeable. So I think it's good because it keeps people accountable, and it just keeps the standard much higher.
And I totally agree. I talk to a lot of food trucks that say, don't do it. You know, they're just like really, really scarred. What would you say to somebody that is watching this or has been on your Facebook group? Like, what would be your advice? Would you say, don't do it, or would you say?
If you want to do it, just understand what you're getting yourself into. I think a lot of people glamorize the food aspect. The one thing I keep hearing over and over again is like, I love to cook, or people say I should open something, and you know, because I'm such a good cook, and they focus on the culinary side, and they forget that there's so much more than just the 3 hours that you're serving to people, right, during that shift, right, or that 5 hours of that event or whatever. It's kind of like being a musician and thinking about that hour, 2 hours you're on stage at Coachella is like everything. You know, they forget about all the hard work that went into it and all the stuff that they had to deal with in order to get to that point, right? I won't ever compare what we do to Coachella, but it's like when we do things like we serve at an event and people are really glad to see our, and then people get excited by our food, and it feels good to do that, and we're feeding people. Those are all great things that we do, right? But what people forget is that the culinary part is only one small part of the business. I always say it's like 25% of the business. The other 75% is like operations, marketing. It's all the other stuff that isn't very glamorous. For example, just the time commitment. For me to do a 3-hour shift, for a 3-hour lunch shift from 11 to 2, I gotta leave the commissary by 9 to get to the place by 10, which means that I've gotta have everything bought and put onto the truck by 9 o'clock, right? So typically there's 30 minutes at the commissary when I just need 30 minutes to make sure everything is there, make sure that I didn't make a mistake. For example, that my hose wasn't still plugged into my truck when I drove off and I yanked the hose off, right?
Yeah.
Or, you know, I've seen that happen. I've done that before. I mean, it's really embarrassing, and it's just, you know, then you got to stop and you're like, besides the fact that you look like the total amateur, you got to go to the guy at the commissary and say, I'm sorry, I ripped this off, and then, you know, that takes time, right? So you need to be there by 8:30, right? Which means that you got to get all your stuff bought. So let's just say that, you know, Restaurant Depot opens at 6 in the morning. I've got to be at Restaurant Depot, call it by 6:30, 7 in the morning, right? To give me enough time so that I can buy the food, load it onto the truck, get onto the truck by 8:30. Between 8:30 and 9, that gives me 30 minutes to make sure everything's good, that the truck is detached from everything that's attached to the commissary. Drive, get on the road by 9, get to the place by 10, then start opening up and prepping things and turning on things and moving things around the truck, and then be ready to open by 11. Go until 2, okay, and then you figure you need the 30 minutes to like kind of tear down. Then get back to the commissary. That might take another hour, so another 3:30, right? Then you take an inventory, you take out the trash, you do some basics. Let's say that's another 30 minutes, right? So you're not leaving until 4 o'clock. I arrived at Restaurant Depot at 6. And I'm finally leaving the commissary at 4, right? So you're kind of thinking that's 10 hours for a 3-hour shift. People don't understand that a 3-hour shift is 10 hours out of your day. That's just one shift.
Yeah.
If you have a dinner shift, add another 5-6 hours to that, right? You know, at least another 4 if like nothing else happens, right? So, you know, that's the time commitment. I think the other thing is that there's a lot of there's a lot of waiting around. Not everything is, it's not like the movie Chef where you just pull up and everyone's just glad to see you, right? I really wish that were the case. If I've ever seen it, it's only been because we've been late and everybody's hungry for whatever's there, right? That's the only reason we see like a bunch of people. There's a lot of waiting around, a lot of downtime, a lot of boredom. I think you have to be prepared for the fact that a lot of times it's gonna be discouraging. It's gonna take time. You're not gonna be profitable on day one. It might take you 18 months before you get profitable. It's going to take a long time before you start getting noticed for caterings and you start getting booked for stuff, you know. And lastly, it's not all about the food. It really isn't. I mean, there are guys out there who serve very mediocre food, but they do really, really well because it's the right food at the right price for that crowd. I can go to a working class part of Los Angeles with my burgers, but I won't sell well. It will be very discouraging because who's going to pay $12 for a burger in a working class part of town? You know, in Santa Monica, they're not going to bat an eye, right? If you're willing to hang in there and you really get to the point where, you know, people really like your food and you're getting booked for stuff, then it's really rewarding. I mean, I'm 8 years into it and, you know, it's rewarding for me at this point. I really wish that this had happened at the 1 year mark, but it didn't, right? It took a long time to get to this point, and now it's good, you know? But even now, it's still challenging. There's always things that you deal with. But the great thing about it is a great culture. Some of the best relationships I've garnered, you know, I've developed in the last 8 years have been with great food trucks. I mean, you know, it's a great community. I was at an event recently and another food truck ran out of buns because they were just getting slammed. Their sales were through the roof. They were able to just come over and say, do you have any buns you can spare? Absolutely, you know, totally, no problem. Like, and I know that I could have done that, gone to somebody else and done that, you know. So I think there's definitely camaraderie there. And also the last thing I would say is like, make sure you have enough capital. That's been one of the biggest things I've seen. 75% of the new trucks in Los Angeles, the brand new trucks, fail within 12 months. And it's not because they have bad food. Even mediocre food here is still good food, I'm telling you. You know, it's like, you know,
best market.
You know, and I'm telling you that it's because they didn't understand that you're going to lose money for the first 12 to 18, 24 months. And you need to just understand that, hey, you know, you might be able to start a truck for $30,000, but that $30,000 isn't going to last you very long if like you're not making any money. Right. So you need to understand that, you know, there's a big capital requirement, and it's probably a lot more than you think it's going to be.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I really, really appreciate you coming out and talking to us. I know you do so much for the food truck community, Food Trucks Unfiltered, and we appreciate you just kind of coming here and giving a really, really easy, accessible way for people just to kind of like listen to you and listen to what, you know, the gems that you drop on a daily basis on your food truck platform, but also now here. And thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to have more of these as the months go on, and so we ask that you subscribe and be the first to know when our next podcast pops out. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Matt.